Hello ladies, I hope you're doing well and enjoying your present circumstances and that you have great plans for improvement. I'm Lydia Ruth and I am welcoming you here from the manse, and I hope that some things that I say will de-stress you instead of distress you. And if I were to have you here for an hour, I would put us on a little itinerary where you would spend deliberate time in de-stressing activities. Might be able to discuss some of that here, but you could put yourself on a little schedule and do that, and perhaps revive your mind and body from the way the world is tying it up in knots. And if you would, please ring the notification bell and click the subscription so that you can see when it comes up on YouTube on the channel. I am still working on getting the notifications sent to your email. I just haven't had time to do it. And as you know, as a homemaker, you can always find more things to do, more than you realize. And so today I'm going to start out by telling you the importance of getting dressed up for the home. And there are numerous channels on YouTube where people talk about wearing your best at home. And I found in Helen Andelin's book, The Fascinating Girl, which was written to single girls back in the day, and she wrote something here that I think is very important, and it's important for the home. You know, we tend to want to just kind of kick back and relax and throw all care to the wind and throw propriety at naught in the home, but it isn't advisable at all, because the habits that you develop at home make you comfortable, and when you get comfortable with something, you feel very uncomfortable when you try to clean up your act and try to dress up. Now, I have a friend that I've known for a number of years, and she and I are making a commitment to dress up our very best for the home before anything, which is very difficult to do. The minute your feet hit the floor, you find something to do and off you go. But we have decided not to leave our rooms or our bathrooms until we are fit to be seen by even ourselves. And we are both rather isolated, but we've decided to do this because it's so good for us and so good for our minds. And we have been talking about the effect of stress on people, where it came from, when was the first time you ever knew about it or felt it, or it started to affect you. And we have been doing some sleuthing and finding out more about it amongst ourselves. You can always read about what the medical profession says and all that, but we are going to research ourselves in our own lives. And so one of the things that I think is so helpful in combating stress, you know, it's like fortification, and everyone laughs at that word because it was when the Quiet Man, when men went to the pub, they called it fortification. But for me, tea is fortification. But getting dressed is like fortification, and it gives you a bit of a barrier between you and the world and you and stress. And before I start on all this, I want to share my teacup with you because I think it goes with this dress. I made this dress several years ago for my daughter, and her and I have been exchanging clothes because I haven't had time to sew anything new. I used to mood sew. If I felt like I'd get up in the morning, oh, today feels like yellow and green, I'm going to make a yellow and green dress. But I haven't had time lately, and she hasn't either, so we're trading off our clothes just so we can each have something different, and this cup seemed to go with. And I have been doing some stealth sipping, and I hope to include some of the pictures on the blog. If you would please click the link in the video below and go to the post on which I have embedded this video so that you can see the other pictures and a summarization maybe of what I have spoken of. And so I want to thank you all for coming and spending some time here, and I hope that you will get some things done while you listen. I don't think I have anything else to show you today, so you might want to just get started on something. And I want to read what Helen Andelin wrote about feminine dress. It says here, good grooming. Another part of the feminine appearance is to be well groomed. And I wanted to mention this to you because that's the first thing we want to do before you get started in your homemaking. It's a worthy job, and it is worthy of you dressing up for it. And no one can take your place. It is one of those unique things in which you're the head of the company, and you determine many of the things that go on in the home. You determine, whether or not to stock up when the pantry is going low, what to put in it. No one's going to stand around lording it over you, telling you every little move to make. You know when it's time to clean something. You know when it's time to rest. You know when it's time for the children to rest, etc. And so it's a unique job. I believe you should dress up for it. Another part of the feminine appearance is to be well groomed. We need not dwell on this, since there is much emphasis on grooming in our modern times. We need only to mention that clean, well-groomed hair, clean body, and clothes are essential to the feminine appearance. And I have mentioned it as far as homemaking goes, that you don't give your body the message that you're just going to lay around today, and that you want to give homemaking a good report by what you do. And so I believe that you ought to have a homemaking wardrobe. And those of you who are going into winter now in the southern hemisphere, and of course we in the northern hemisphere, we're still enduring cold mornings, I had suggested before that one of the things you do to de-stress or to fortify yourself for oncoming stress is to go for a walk. But I would suggest you go out if you can and buy yourself a coat or a jacket or something that you feel that just makes you happy to walk around in. I prefer a long coat that looks like a dress and makes you think differently when you're wearing something pretty. And if you're going to be walking and someone's going to be seeing you, now around here I'm out on the farm, nobody sees me, but I still want to dress up a la Jane Austen, because Jane would have worn a cloak or a coat. And go and get yourself something to wear outdoors so you can go on your walk. And if you only last a minute or two, get dressed up and go out there, because this is part of the de-stress program. And if you were here and I had you for an hour, the first thing we would do after you bathed and got yourself ready is I would take you out for a walk. Then we would come back in and have our tea, or we might even take our tea out with us. And so you want to come along with me for about an hour here, maybe 45 minutes. And as we put away the world and we discuss things that are good, pure, and lovely. Now we might hint on things that aren't so pleasant, but we will always leave you de-stressed. So let me continue here with what Helen Andelin said in The Fascinating Girl. We need only mention that clean, well-groomed hair, clean body, and clothing are essential to the feminine appearance. This is not to say that men should not be well-groomed also, but they expect women to be even more immaculate than they are themselves. And somehow it's more of a disgrace for a woman to be slovenly and careless than for a man to be. The reason is, I think, that men get busy, and a lot of them doing manual labor, and cannot pay too much attention to their grooming, but they would like I feel so sorry for the elderly men and the veterans. I see them sometimes when I go grocery shopping, and the things that they have to look at, women that are not well groomed, and think of them back in the 1940s and 50s when you could stand on the corner and watch all the girls go by in their pretty dresses. There isn't anything for them there's nothing for them to think of more things that are lovely in women. And we have a great responsibility, I think, to look nice for other people. You may disagree, but we can still be friends. If you see a young man that has just been playing basketball sit down and relax before he combs his hair and straightens his clothes, it seems excusable. But when it comes right down to it, men are less inclined to be concerned about their appearance and clothes than women, but they expect the women to be the opposite, tidy and immaculate. in bringing out the contrast between yourself and the masculine, you must have an all-absorbing pride in your appearance, cleanliness, and orderliness. You must endeavor to appear at your best every minute of the day and under all circumstances. Now, she's going to go into modesty here. This is something we need to pay attention to. And if you're a woman of vital age, and you're concerned and you want to be a mentor to someone, or you really want to be an effect on someone, you cannot go around slovenly. That is the one thing, is people can criticize the young with their immodesty and their horrible clothes, but have you got an alternative for them? Is there anything about you that they'd ever want to copy? Sometimes I'll look at the elderly women and think, why don't they care? Because they don't realize that everybody's an influencer in some way or other, and should feel somewhat responsible for our fellow human being. And so if you want to help young people with their modesty and with the way they dress, then you have got to make sure you're immaculate too. And so my friend and I, we made a commitment when spring came up. We were going to do better, going to get up and get dressed and just look bandbox fresh and look maybe a little over the top, prepared, even though we weren't going to be going anywhere, because we needed that encouragement and fortification, especially if we were alone. We want to have that humanness about us. So let me read what she said about modesty. Still another part of the feminine appearance is modesty. In spite of the emphasis in our times on the sex symbol, men do not respect women who expose their bodies to the public. Not only should the body be reasonably covered, but also the underwear. Now, of course, this was before the modern styles, which I think never will go away. Maybe they will, where all of your straps and everything were showing. And it became a style. I don't know who started that, but that was a crime against humanity, in my opinion. Slips hanging, straps that show and expose underwear, even when a girl sits in a chair. Higher types of civilizations have always been modest. It seems to go with intelligence and refinement. The Bible, the scriptures do talk about refinement and talk about courtesy. A lot of people said, all that etiquette stuff, all that manner stuff, that's not in the Bible. Well, yes, it is. And you'll see that more people got in trouble in the scriptures from rudeness and from lack of propriety and from disrespect. That's all manners and refinement is respect. And so only savages and primitive tribes lacked this refinement, except for certain unwholesome deviations in our modern society. So I would like to stop there. This is The Fascinating Girl, and I wanted to tell you something about. I know a lot of you got excited about getting those books, Fascinating Womanhood, Fascinating Girl, and giving them to someone, but it's the same with the movie Wives and Daughters. I've often told people, don't just hand those DVDs to someone and say, watch this. You've got to be able to sit down with people and tell them what it means and what it's about, because it's kind of like Cliff Notes, because they will look at somebody who's living a disrespectful life and say, oh, I really like that character. She's having more fun. Or she's prettier. And so you've got to sit down and talk to them about, how she ended up and what kind of people she was attracting. And well, it's the same with The Fascinating Girl. You've got to read it to them so they understand it in balance. Otherwise, they can read it and draw really strange conclusions. And I've seen that happen. Because people do not reason in the same way. They don't understand figures of speech. They don't understand illustrations. They don't understand what it is saying. And I think that was one reason why the classes, when they first came out, were so valuable, because they would preface this whole book by saying, what is your goal, and how can you improve, and what are the mistakes that you are making. Now, I listened to a YouTube channel, and it's for women in Europe, and it's like high, well, maybe America too, but it's how to be high class, and it's how to, manage in a rich society or a high class society, higher class. I'm not going to be doing that because I live on the farm, but I still want to see what it is that I could learn from it. And she talks quite a bit about modesty and about exposing, sloppy clothing, and she also talks about refinement and also about courtesy. And one of the things that she said in one of her recent ones that I watched was, and her name is Anna Bay, B-E-Y, and she spoke about this, that it shows that you don't have self-dignity and that you don't care about other people if you're sloppy or careless in the way that you look. And then she shows, her way and her taste and everything. It wouldn't do out here because we're country folk. But the principle is there. And so I want to now go on to, and if you are not dressed, then you go bathe and get dressed. You can still listen to me while you do this. And when you get your hair done, you look in the mirror and look at your eyes and make sure that you haven't hardened your heart, and try to be happy and think happy thoughts, because this will make you better company for yourself, especially if you are alone a lot at home. And many women will be alone at home. And I know you think it's loneliness. It isn't actually loneliness. It's just isolation, because you probably have experienced being so lonely that you decided to get together with someone, invite them over or meet them, but the experience became more distressing because of the talk wasn't polite, or the talk was gloomy or scary, or the news was bad, or they were rude and unrefined, and it wasn't as pleasant as you thought it would be. Or maybe you just decided you would go out and go somewhere, leave the home because it's lonely. Let's go out, let's go shopping, let's go look at something, and decided that it was quite unpleasant out there. So what you want to do is make yourself good company, or make good company out of yourself, just in case you do find people of like mind, but make good company of yourself. And that means think good thoughts. Philippians 4:8. What's true, lovely, good, pure, and of good report, and that's noble. Think on these things. And I believe that our Lord knew the danger of thinking sour thoughts and depressing thoughts and defeating thoughts. He knew. Now they're finding out that depressing thoughts and attitudes can cause all kinds of health problems. And of course, I believe that God gives life, and He wants us to have life. And I believe my friend gave me a scripture where she talked about that, where knowing the words of God, she says it's good for you. When He says think on these things, it's good for you because it lifts you up, thinking on these things that are lovely. And so if you do happen to be someone who's always melancholy, you can always train yourself, the minute one of those dark, gloomy thoughts come to you, to train yourself to think on something that is more lighthearted, something you'd like to do, something you'd like to see, somewhere you'd like to be. Think about it. It does lift the heart. And then as you start to train yourself to do this, then you'll automatically change over once you have planted that in your mind. I'm going to go on now. If you are dressed and you have a good attitude and you've done a little smile there, to the fashion teas. And this is from a book called Tea and Crumpets, and it's written by Margaret Johnson, and it's British. And so before I continue with that, I just wanted to ask you, and if you were going on a little 1-hour journey with me and you were here and I was taking you through a program, I'd ask you, have you had your prayers? Have you made your list and prayed over your list? And have you done your stretches or your exercise? Just find on YouTube or somewhere online illustrated stretches for anxiety, or or depression or fatigue or illustrated. I one time looked for one illustrated stretches for and exercises for lack of motivation or for lethargy or for backache or for anything like that. You could find anything. Just do one, just do two, and you don't have to treat it like it's a military service. it's so different than the exercises that we had growing up in the public schools, which were grueling. And so do that, and let's see, what else? Have you had your tea? And if you were here with me, you would get to go and pick out what you wanted and pick out the cup that you wanted, and then we would only what novel is it from the 17 or 1800s that somebody said, let us talk of pleasant things? It was probably Jane Austen. So let me read to you about fashion teas, and this is about I really wanted to read this about the one about the ship. And it's called All Aboard. And the popularity of afternoon tea truly has no bounds. Elegant hotel dining rooms, quaint tea shops, and ornate salons that provide the expected settings for the afternoon ritual. But luxury trains and cruise lines have also embraced the practice. Now, you remember when I took my family on a train trip in this house, I turned the house into a train because I measured it and found out it was just as wide as one of the antique old-fashioned trains. And it was, I looked up the Royal Scotsman and found their menu, and I made all the things, and I made tickets for everyone and invitations, and I had a schedule and an itinerary. We had programs in the lounge. We had, and in their cabins, it was all decorated like a train, and they had things to do in there. And we even had a play that had something to do with the trip. And we stopped and went on excursions outside the train. And we had, a train whistle to call them all back in. And we had such a wonderful time. Well, now I'm getting ready for a cruise. And so this cruise, and I noticed Dollar Tree now has abundant amount of seaside decor for $1.25. You can get anchors, and you can get signs, and you can get huge seashells and all kinds of seaside paraphernalia. I'm thinking about that. And so this talks about the I'll just finish reading this to you. It says, luxury trains and cruise lines have also embraced the practice. Several Orient Express Pullman trains, the Venice Simplon Orient Express, which travels between Venice and Paris, the Royal Scotsman, which journeys through Scotland from April to October, and the British Pullman, which provides glamorous day excursions from London to various destinations in the English countryside, host afternoon tea services as soon as the guests are on board. Isn't that nice? So as soon as they get here on the ship, then we will have tea. So it talks also about the ships and the cruise lines. It says the ships of Crystal Cruise Lines, never heard of them, also offer daily afternoon tea time aboard Symphony and Serenity. What nice names, Now that's very de-stressing, isn't it? We should name our rooms like that, shouldn't we, in the home? Set in sunlit palm court, tea is served amid lush greenery, rattan furnishings, and soothing classical music. Yes, I really do think that much of the classical music, especially Beethoven, was healing, very healing. During the sailings, 3 themed teas are offered. A white tie and tails English colonial high tea with finger sandwiches, scones, and traditional pastries. American summer tea with sandwiches, cheesecakes, apple cinnamon cupcakes, and ice cream. With the very popular Mozart tea with traditional Tyrolean sandwiches and Austrian pastries, ranging from black forest cake and all this other things that I can't even pronounce. Staff dressed in velvet, brocade, and lace also offer specialty drinks, and coffee with whipped cream, and coffee powder, etc. Thought you might enjoy reading that. And I would say that one of the things we would do if you were on a de-stress hour or de-stressing program would be you would read to me and I would read to you. And I had a friend that came to stay for a while, and that's what we would just read to each other interesting things, and then we would have tea, and then we would decide what we would do the rest of the day depending on what my schedule was. But she said that was one of the most meaningful things we did, was to read aloud to each other. And when you think of it, this is one of those childhood things that somehow provides fortification against stress. Most of the things that we would do to de-stress, they call it personal care or self-care now. For caregivers are really keen on this. People that have to look after someone in their home and it's full-time, they now realize they have to indulge in caregiving, self-care, because they have to build their minds and bodies back up and be rested. And so I noticed that a lot of the self-care things that people did were actually things we learned in childhood, and one of them was to listen to someone read or to read aloud. And when I was homeschooling my children, I encouraged them to come and read aloud to me while I was doing something else, maybe in the kitchen, that they weren't able to do. So I wanted to also go on to this next subject, which is homemaking. I don't cover too many hints for the home or for homemaking or for cleaning, because there's so many of them. You can just go find those yourself. I used to watch some called Clean With Me, and I used to get inspired by people who were redecorating or just enjoying their home, going through things. And I don't feel like I need to give you any hints, because your home is different and you'll have different needs, and there will be some things more important to you, and so you can take care of that yourself. But I will say that homemaking is part of it. So after you are well groomed and dressed, and you have your preparation, and you've prayed, and you've had your tea, and you've made your list, you've done a few stretches, now it's time to get busy with your homemaking. And the list might include homemaking is a lot of things. It's cleaning, but it's also pleasing arrangements. It's also comforts. And that's what Cheryl Mendelssohn's book Home Comforts is all about. It's a huge book, but I ran across this part, and it was called Miscellaneous Bed Manners. And if you've ever been sick in bed, it's really important that anybody that comes and talks to you is nice, because it helps you recover. But anyway, she had this cute little subtitle, Miscellaneous Bed Manners. I wanted to read it to you. For both physical and psychological reasons, a bed treated with respect will be fresher and will be more ready to induce sleep. And I remember my family saying that after I had hung the bedding on the line, and especially the linens, the sheets, and the pillowcases, and they'd had a wonderful night's sleep after that. And so one of the things that we did when we were children is help our mother hang things on the line on a nice summer's day. So even if you don't have that habit and you don't want to do that, at least hang one item from the wash out on the line with a couple of pegs, just to experience it. And the trouble with most of us who live out here in the country is we think of it as a job. We get out there and we peg everything on there real fast, and we feel we're under time constraints, and we forget to look at the sky and see the blue and see the clouds and listen to the birds and look at all the things, the green that's growing around. And sometimes I include a picture of the background of the laundry that I've hung, just to show you what I mean by that. But those are things learned in youth that we need to revive. So even if you just hang one thing, let's say a tea towel, a dish towel from the kitchen that you've washed, go and hang that out. Find a little place to hang it outside so that you can experience what it's like to be out there and absorb the other things of the atmosphere. So let me get back to it. Old-fashioned bed manners forbade sitting on a bed in street clothes. I had forgotten that. People just weren't supposed to sit on the bed. And I had totally forgotten that. I hadn't even thought about that. That you just didn't sit on someone's bed. Everyone's manners have deteriorated so much. There's no privacy. Old-fashioned manners forbade sitting on a bed in street clothes, especially someone else's bed, and most especially a sick person's bed. If you lie down on a made-up bed for your afternoon nap, cover the bedspread with something you can readily launder. That's a good idea. That's why they had the little quilts, and they folded them and put them at the end of the bed, because that was what you would pull up over you when you laid down for a rest. Otherwise, wash your face, undress, and crawl between the sheets. We used to have to put our sleeping clothes on for our naps. Isn't that interesting? I suppose that'd be too much work for most people, though. Don't put bags, purses, briefcases, shoes, and similar things on the bed. They have been on too many floors, sidewalks, and other questionable places, probably even public transportation. Hadn't even thought of that. So yes, that just gives us, my friend and I that have made a commitment to do better, both in our preparation and our appearance. We are making a commitment to do better in our home. So that little paragraph did me a lot of good. So dressing and making the bed. This is such a, rest also in Brian Kozlowski's book, The Jane Austen Diet. He showed where she emphasized rest and where they went to sleep early, and how important that rest, and how stress was anathema to them. There always will be stress, but we have to regard it as kind of an enemy. As an enemy, yes. And one of the things was that they did go to bed early. A friend of mine remembers being counseled by her elderly aunt long ago that even if she found herself in poverty or sickness, she should always make a good bed for herself. Not only is this advice as good today as it was then, the bed that was good then is still good today, since people discovered the secrets of good bed making many centuries ago. I'll read more about this, but I will tell you, those of you who are new here, you probably haven't been in my old videos, but I decided one winter to sleep in every single bed in the house, including the fold-away cots, to see what it would be like to sleep in all those rooms. And I was horrified. The beds were so bad. I didn't sleep at all. And so I redid them all, got new mattresses, got new bed linens. I got, and I have my eye on some linen cotton blends for sheets. I'd really like to try those. And so I'm saving for that. And what a difference it made in the atmosphere of my home too, to have all the fresh cotton bedding. And I paid attention to everything I had, and even the pillows. And I replaced everything. I've even got feather pillows now. And so, dressing and making the bed. The minimum well-dressed contemporary bed has a mattress for softness, which is encased in a cover for cleanliness and comfort. The sleeper lies on a sheet, which serves the dual function of protecting the skin from the scratchiness of the mattress, but there is also a sheet above the sleeper, and this too serves as a double function, protecting the skin from the scratchy blanket. It also keeps the blanket from getting soiled. And do you remember when I read Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, how one of the things he did, he had a kind of a boarding school for people who were going to get jobs after slavery, after living in little cabins, were now going to go and get an education and get jobs, and he wanted to prepare them for what life would be like out there. And so a lot of them, he said, didn't know about sheets, and he said the first time that he slept at a fine house, he was hired as a teacher, and he was sleeping in someone's guest room, and he said the first time he slept on top of both sheets, and the second time he did something else, but finally he figured it out. There's a top sheet and a bottom sheet. And many of us have to be, it's a refined thing, but it's also designed not to be conceited, but to protect the bedding and also to protect your own skin. And a lot of people have sleep disorders, they call them. And it could be from the artificial fabrics and things like that. And I found just changing all my things and having more natural things around has helped my sleep a lot. During the day when no one is sleeping, a decorative cloth covers the whole arrangement. That's probably talking about what we call a bedspread, keeping it clean and making it look beautiful while not in use. All this was also true of the bed of any person of means in 12th century France. Museums have Renaissance paintings of beds made up just like yours. So then she has another chapter on bedclothes and making the bed. I thought that might interest you and cheer you up a little bit. And we would only talk about pleasant things anyway if you were here. And now I'm going to read from Linda Lichter's book here. And we'll discuss a few more things about I'm dealing with stress now. I mean, I'm trying to address stress, and I believe that a lot of stress could be avoided or dealt with very easily if we had the fortification for it. And one of the things that we all need to realize is that we don't actually have to sit and listen to a lot of things that make us feel uneasy or stressful, and yet we do. And whether it's the media, we don't have to read stuff from the media. Have you ever thought of just taking a whole day off from it, from any kind of media, and not knowing what's going on? And I tell people now, we're going to sit and have tea here, but I don't want to hear anything about what Congress is doing or what the media is doing, because it's gotten so bad that the reports are always verging on just filth, you know. So she has a chapter on motherhood, and I wanted to read that because even if you don't have children, you had a mother. And so I wanted to, it's important that we know what attitudes we have to have about this. The authority of motherhood. Remember, in a previous broadcast I told you not to give up your authority. Creating those refined and happy homes was a confidence-boosting source of pride that Victorian women relished. You know, I noticed that feeling of wholesome, feeling of fulfillment was very strong when I decided to homeschool my kids. Before that, everything seemed surface and dull, but when you get your homeschool books, I got a lot of mine from Becca, but I chose other things too, then you start to realize how this knowledge and this training in reading and writing and arithmetic also includes character building and love. It changes your whole motivation. It changes your whole life. And you don't just sit back and watch the direction in which your children are going. You have a great deal of responsibility to guide them. And the scriptures do say that women are supposed to guard and guide the home. And if there's no one there, there's nothing to guard or guide besides just the material house. In contrast to moderns, the Victorians believed they were effective reformers at home because of their domesticity, not in spite of it. For all its practical demands, home, and especially motherhood, was not a burden to be relieved or banished. On the contrary, to activists, motherhood was an ennobling experience, an added power and development of some of the most tender sentiments of the human heart, and not a limitation. And I would say that if you have small children or young children, to get them, guide them to write something or make something or draw something, put a border around it and everything, deliberately, and save it, or put it somewhere it can be seen and be very proud of it. In fact, if I were able, I would have, I'm still planning on doing this with my descendants. I want them to decorate my walls. I want all of their things. I want my home decorated with things they have made me. I still have quite a few quilts and pillows that my daughter made me, and I still have But if I were to do it again, I'd be more serious about them creating my home for me. And so now I want to continue because I want to talk a little bit from Brian Kozlowski's book here, which I like because he has so much to do with health. And I told you about these two books. One was Stormy O'Merton's book about Greater Health God's Way, where she had taken, I think, 9 things that created good health. And most people just attack the food and the exercise. But without the spiritual part to it, and she started out with stress-free living. Without that, no amount of nutrition or exercise discipline will help. It will only, in fact, sometimes it will make it worse if you don't correct some of those other things. And so I wanted to read his thing about quietness here. So that would be one of the things we would do if you were to come along with me for 45 minutes or an hour, is we have some deliberate quietness. In fact, there are some cultures that do not fill up the airspace between two people with constant conversation. Somebody will say something, and then they'll stop, and the other person will let some time go by before they say anything, because they don't believe that you have to keep, they don't feel awkward with quiet spaces like some people do. So I want to talk about, he's got this chapter that's so wonderful called The Mind-Body Connection. I'm really looking forward to him doing more of this with other old novels. And it's called An Interval of Meditation. Now, the Bible does talk about meditation. David said he would meditate on God's law day and night. And all it means is to consider it, to think about it, to let it dwell in your mind and revolve it and look at it from different aspects. And so when you meditate on something, you think about it. Sometimes Austen heroines have to go off the mental grid. This is on page 246 of Brian Kozlowski's book, The Jane Austen Diet. But it really is just a lifestyle. Sometimes Austen's heroines have to go off the mental grid. Yes, and I'm off the mental grid right now too, with no one here at the moment, to process those shocking articles of news. You know, they had just as much shock as we do today, but we are not fortified for it. We do not go for a walk in the copse, the little forest behind your house. We do not deliberately do that. We wait. Here's the problem, ladies. We wait until something hits us, and then we run straight to take a hot bath or go for a long walk or have a cup of tea, and it's lost because it does not. We need to fortify ourselves before it comes so that it doesn't bother us. And then we need to learn, like I said previously, to laugh, because that also is great medicine. And also, I think we have to be careful that we don't let it hit us so hard. Like, you have to look around and say, wait a minute now. I'm still sitting in this chair. No bomb has hit my house. I still have tea. The electric's still on. I've still got water. I have a car sitting in my driveway. I can go to the grocery store. I still have my books, and no one in my family has done anything extremely dangerous to me. And so we just kind of look around at what we have. Are we safe? And most people are pretty, if you were to look, they're more distressed than they actually need to be. So let me just read this. An interval of meditation. Sometimes Austen heroines have to go off the grid to process these shocking articles of news that seem to pummel them daily. When I wrote that book, Just Breathing the Air, there were a few people that accused me of seeing the Alaskan homestead lifestyle in the 1940s and 50s through rose-colored glasses. But the thing is, they didn't see it. We were fortified from it, but there were tragedies and near tragedies. There were extremely frightening parts of that book that where I recorded things that happened, things of great fear, and often our father was without work, and often our cupboards were bare. There were times when it was not fun, but my mother and father had this wonderful, deep philosophical view of life that was so helpful, and they liked to laugh, and they would laugh about what they could make with what was left, and my father was always very diligent about finding work. And if he couldn't find work, he would work at home and sell something that he made. And so, but today, when we get hit with bad news, like there's no work and there's no food, everyone, they're not mentally and physically fortified enough to withstand it. Sometimes Austen heroines have to go off the mental grid. The news that seems to pummel them daily. The typical, your sister just ran off with someone, your creepy preacher just proposed to you, the gorgeous man you rejected 8 years ago just moved back. Nothing very bad, the fate of thousands. If you read the Jane Austen novels, it's all in there. These sorts of things. Every life is guaranteed its fair share of mental shake-ups. And when they come, heroines throughout Austen world calm back down with the Regency version of meditation. Emma, Anne, Eleanor, and Lizzie all practice it. And I think the New Testament talks about things that Timothy, in 1st and 2nd Timothy, he was a young preacher that was admonished to meditate on these things. And it was a whole bunch of good things like faith and virtue and knowledge and nobility, things like that, character qualities, to meditate on those. Frequently needing mental take fives, quick retreats to somewhere quiet where their brains can ask a few therapeutic questions. Now, one thing that I've learned from talking to people is that you're not obligated to sit through something that's very distressing. You are allowed to get up and leave. You can say, excuse me, and just go somewhere else. Or I have a previous appointment, or I've got to do something. You don't have to sit there in a place where something's uncomfortable for you, or someone maybe is misbehaving so badly that it's starting to affect you. I'm talking about adults. So they take these quick fives and they leave the room. How do I feel about it? How am I going to respond? And they just go and get their mind settled. An interval of meditation was the best corrective, said Jane. A few minutes of quiet solitude in her bedroom allows Lizzie to wrap her mind around the weirdness of Charlotte marrying Mr. Collins. Emma likewise depends on separating herself now and then for the relief and quiet reflection, especially after Mr. Elton's gross proposal. Sure, these meditations might look a bit amateurish for those of us accustomed to viewing meditation in a complicated way, but Austen never knew meditation in Eastern mystic terms. For her, the real magic of meditation lay in simply experiencing the power of delightful quiet. See, if you were here and we were doing one of these de-stressing hours, we would have some time for delightful quiet. Now, to make good friends of yourself and good company of yourself, when you have quiet, be sure to think on things that are good and lovely. It's going to take quite a bit of training if you have been, I guess you would say, brainwashed into thinking only the worst all the time. Silence, stillness, and quiet. Most of us don't fully experience it today until we're fast asleep. But Austen knew that being cognitively silent from time to time was essential to a healthy mind. The quietness of it does me good, she wrote her sister in 1813, describing her enjoyment of a few moments of snug solitude with the front drawing room all to myself. Her novels are arranged accordingly. Nobody functions well without frequent doses of suitable quietness. And that should be part of your home ritual. And that was when I was homeschooling my children between the hours of maybe 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, I encourage them to go by themselves to a room with a book or some writing paper or something, just to be quiet. And or one of them didn't like to do that, and so I let him walk around outside in the backyard by himself. In Emma, Jane Fairfax automatically correlates her decline in mental health to the absence of silence in her life. I have never known the blessing of one tranquil hour. Fanny Price can relate. The incessant noise and clamor of her family's house in Portsmouth gives Fanny an aching head, both literal and mental. She longs above all for the peace and tranquility of Mansfield Park. All throughout the New Testament, the greetings of every letter that was written was peace be unto you. And then the final goodbye part at the end was peace and grace and all these nice things. One of the overarching themes in Mansfield Park is the pursuit of this quiet, restorative peace. Humans have long understood that being constantly surrounded by noise has a negative effect on our minds. Don't you know? Do you remember when you could go shopping and there was nothing playing in the stores overhead for you to listen to? There was no noise. In fact, do you remember before people started taking their noise with them? Do you remember when it was noisy enough just listen to cars go by, but the music, or noisic as we call it, did not exist in the marketplaces, except for once in a while someone was actually playing an instrument somewhere on the street. Quietness, even the word noise, from the Latin nausea, means a form of sickness. Quietness is a primal need. I wonder if practicing quietness, if it could cure more than we realize. There's no study or proof of it, I don't suppose, but we could do it. We could try it with make it our own selves and experiment and just deliberately get away and get quiet. Have you ever been anywhere, like on a mountaintop, taken a little drive up a mountaintop to get out just to listen to the quiet? But it's possible you could hear it in your own, you could hear the quiet. It's so interesting. But it's possible you could have the quiet even in your own backyard. Our brains are built to require occasional periods of silence to reboot themselves, like computers downloading, processing, and organizing data more efficiently during quiet moments, even growing more brain cells to smarten our response to the new information. Yeah, you need that quiet to restore your mind, to grow more brain cells. It's no fluke that people often get their best ideas in the quiet of a shower, a bath, or a bed, and that's why Austen heroines like Anne in Persuasion eagerly seek out quiet times for when they have important feelings to investigate. See, they were in touch with their feelings. Silence allows us to process our emotions and solve problems much more successfully. Yet, despite living in the far quieter world of Regency England, Austen knew that silence was a luxury you have to conscientiously remind yourself to enjoy. We are so afraid sometimes to really indulge and enjoy in things that build us back up. And we're often told, well, that's indulgent. You shouldn't do that. But yet, when you look at growing up, why we didn't have stress as children possibly was we were sheltered from it, and also we were guided into doing things that were good for us. Let us have the luxury of silence, says Fanny. So take a short mental holiday on a regular basis. Talked about holiday last time, how expensive they are. A lot of people would pay to come out and live where you live, maybe, just for the change. I'm wondering about silence. Just taking a little mental holiday and silence probably be a lot cheaper and you would have the advantage of not having to endure the noise of a vacation. That's pretty noisy too, you know. Take a short mental holiday on a regular basis, quietly sitting in unwearied contemplation. That's from one of her books. For a few minutes without the sound of a phone, a TV, a radio, or any kind of a broadcast. Just 2 minutes of silence has been found to be more mentally recharging than listening to relaxing music. 2 minutes of silence. As soon as you have clicked me off, I want you to go out and have those 2 minutes of silence. And if I had a list for you, I'd say you come back in and get your cup of tea. And I have friends that like to paint little pictures, and they have learned to paint on bookmarks because they're small and they can accomplish the whole painting. And they say that that gives you that feeling of rejuvenation and relaxation. In Austin world, sometimes the best thing to do, hear, or say is absolutely nothing at all. Such is the healthy art of important nothings Mrs. Norris in Mansfield Park has yet to discover. Mrs. Norris was now trying to be in a bustle without having anything to bustle about, and laboring to be important where nothing was wanted but tranquility and silence. Now, I told you last time, there are some people that just look for chaos. They look for problems. They look for something to get upset about. And warning you that you've got to be very careful as a homemaker to make sure that it doesn't have anything to do with your home. And when you start letting in stress and bad news, then it's going to affect your homemaking and the tranquility of your home, and you won't like it at home. You'd want to get away from it. So I'll just look at my notes before I say goodbye and tell you a couple of more things that you could do. Number one was no depressing talk, and also to indulge in thankfulness. I was thinking about that this morning when I was out for my Regency walk, was being thankful for every little thing. Even if I have a nice pair of outdoor walking boots, and I was so thankful for them, and thankful that God let me live one more day, and thankful also that I could hang my clothes on the line, and just thankful for a little flower that was blooming. And another thing that we used to do when we were children was pick flowers. Well, today I don't suppose you're allowed to do that because you live maybe in an area where everything's cultivated and it belongs to someone else. But we have some buttercups growing outside, and so I picked some just for that memory and put them in a little jar, and what a relief it gave me. So you should grow a picking garden in a pot somewhere, just so you can experience that again, because that's one of the things that was very unstressful for children. And so no depressing talk. And then the other thing was this lady that I was watching that talks about, bringing yourself up in society, which we don't need to do because we're already there, aren't we? As homemakers, we're already up there. But I picked up a couple of hints from her that were very good about conversation. And this is one reason ladies do get depressed. You get so much bad news that after a while, and so much depressing talk that after a while, it affects your mood. And that was don't air your dirty laundry. That's an old one. That was so old that people cannot understand it because they're not pegging their clothes on the line to dry. You would only not be ashamed. If the laundry hanging on your line was clean, you wouldn't be embarrassed. But if you hung dirty laundry on your line, you would be embarrassed. And so the saying was, don't air your dirty laundry. And it meant, don't show the public all the things wrong with your family. You don't tell them what Uncle Jake did and what your great niece did, and all these shameful things that they do or disturbing things that they do. And you don't do that. You don't air your dirty laundry. And the reason was, eventually some of these people will straighten out, and then other people that you've told will still have the memory of it. And so sometimes if you wait long enough, things will straighten themselves out. So that don't air your dirty laundry. That came from the way we used to wash clothes, and you would air your laundry out or air your sheets out or something like that, but you wouldn't air your dirty laundry because it was offensive and it smelled bad and it looked bad. So it's the same thing with what we say, with our thoughts and with our speech, and it's not very refined to air your dirty laundry. You might want to look that up and see if you can get a better definition of it. And so, one of the best things you can do is put a seal on your lips and be very careful what you tell people. And in that way, you can fortify yourself from the distress. Sometimes repeating the dirty laundry can create that feeling of tenseness and tightness in your chest and distress all over again. Now, I learned a new phrase from my friend. And she had a mother who would say at night when it was time to, wind down and everyone, end the day, she said, I'm going to close shop. And it just meant, she's going to put everything away, clean everything up, pull the drapes closed, lock the doors, close shop. So now, ladies, I'm going to close shop. And I hope you have a wonderful day and that this has been very helpful to you. And I love your comments. You're giving me some good ideas, too. And I appreciate all that you do for me and for your prayers especially. And so I love you. Thank you for everything. Stay close to Christ. Goodbye.